With that, I would now like to introduce our first speaker today, James Cater of EVCx. EVCx is New England's largest energy delivery company, serving 4 million customers in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. James is EVCx's program lead, EV infrastructure implementation. James, welcome to the EVCx Forum. If you'd like to join us now on camera.
Great.
Hi, James.
Thank you, David.
Take it away.
Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. And thank you for everybody who is online virtually as part of CS Week. I was excited to listen in yesterday to the amazing speakers who presented on various aspects of the utility space and the intersection between the utility space and EVs. Certainly some very, we have some talent in this space, so that's great. And thanks to CS Week for putting this on and not letting the pandemic slow down our velocity in standing this up. Also thanks to the sponsor, ABB, who thought it important to be a part of this. And so thank you for everybody who's putting this on. As David mentioned, I lead our implementation efforts for EV infrastructure in EVCx. And I'd like to just talk a little bit about what we're doing up here in the Northeast in terms of programming, what we're doing in terms of our thinking around this and how it impacts what we as a company are looking to drive towards in the decades to come. So with that, and we'll just go through the agenda, I'd like to set the context, where we are in terms of where we dwell and where we service in an electric capacity and the utility capacity, what that means for the transportation and electrification and transportation space. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we see our role in EV infrastructure, and then talk about the programs that we run, successes, lessons learned. We've been at this for a couple of years, so we have a couple pieces of advice and feedback, and hope it's valuable to potential utility programs that are to come. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing in the residential space, because we can't do our flagship programs without also considering what is going on in the residential space in terms of EV charging, where the vast majority of charging is going to take place. So why don't we just jump on in, and let's first take a look at a graph that I like to use in terms of our carbon emissions. New England is where EVCx dwells and where EVCx operates and has our service territory. If you look at the spread in sources of carbon emissions versus the United States, it's a little different. We have, compared to the United States, greater uses and emissions in the carbon and residential area, lower in electric power and industrial, and that sort of fits in the environment of an area that has some significant urbanization, significant population, and does not have a huge industrial base. But what I want to focus in on is the outsized percentage of carbon emissions from transportation. In New England, it's above 40%, hovering a little bit above 45%, in fact. And this is the context in which we sort of dwell, and we'll lead into how this leads into how we operate our program. But keep this in mind as we walk through it, because it's important to understand that transportation is the biggest wedge of carbon emissions in our service territory. In terms of the EV market, and what we're seeing here, and this is taken from our Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, what we'd like to just demonstrate here is the growth of EVs over time, both PHEVs, plug-in hybrid EVs, and battery EVs, sort of growing year over year and getting a little bit, having a sort of a little bit of a parabolic curve to them. And you see over time, and this is sort of an interesting piece, not only do you see the growth in EVs, but you also see the growth in the need for charging infrastructure as EVs overtake PHEVs around sales. So we expect that trend to continue. We expect PEVs to grow more linearly. We expect BEVs to grow more exponentially. And that sets the stage for the need for this infrastructure, the great need for this infrastructure in Massachusetts and the rest of our electric service territory in the Northeast. To further complement this space, speak about how we sort of have this area, this deck, this place of progressive energy needs in our service territory. We dwell in an environment where our states have articulated zero emission goals. In Massachusetts, the expectation is that they will have net zero emissions by 2050. In Connecticut, which we service as well, they have articulated a plan for 100% carbon-free electric sector by 2040. And we have followed in the same way. As a utility that services both of these states, we are now announced, or recently announced, our CEO has recently announced that we will be, as a company, first utility to do so, we will be carbon neutral. Our operations will be carbon neutral by 2030. That's 10 years away. It's a big thing. All hands on deck, and we're excited to do it. But again, we want to set the context about the conversation about EV. This is where we dwell, and this is where we're thinking about going and being sort of that clean energy leader. And just so you know who we are, EVCx is the largest energy company in New England. 8,300 employees in 3 states. New Hampshire, you see New Hampshire here, and Massachusetts and Connecticut, and about 4 million customers. And that is in electric. We service electric, natural gas, and also water. Uniquely, EVCx has recently acquired a water infrastructure company. And so we are very interested in sort of the synergies that exist between those 3 pieces. And as you see here, we have a significant service territory. So that is all to say that, given the 2030 goals by our company, and given the goals of the states in which we service, we as a company have a commitment to be a clean energy leader. And it's not just in in the spaces of electric vehicles. We also looking joint ventures with offshore wind. We have robust energy efficiency programs. But that is to say that we are primed to deliver clean energy commitments in the EV space. And I'd like to say, as a rule, and I know a number of utilities are on this webinar, to support the goals of electric vehicle growth, and I know there are jurisdictional goals. Massachusetts has their goals. Boston as a city has goals for EV adoption. Where you dwell in your jurisdictions, I'm sure there may be something that says we're looking to have X numbers of EVs on the road by Y date. And so if that is the case, it's important to recognize that the electric distribution companies, the electric company, is going to be central and must be central to this conversation. It's the best way that we get things done. It's the best way we move things forward in this space. And so those of you who are considering and thinking about programmatic things and where the utility sort of sits, it's a very interesting space in this transportation space, because we are, as an electric utility, now for the first time introducing ourselves into the transportation space. And that's a very interesting place to be as transportation electrifies over time. So that's the context. That's the context where we sit in and where we've sort of been working to develop our program. So why don't we take a look at the program, do a deep dive into our program, so that you can understand how we sort of came about this, what it is, what we're learning in doing these projects. So at the end of 2017, our regulators, the Massachusetts Department of Public Utility, ordered and gave us the permission to deploy $45 million of capital in our electric service territory in Massachusetts for the purpose of building in EV, electric vehicle infrastructure. What do I mean by electric vehicle infrastructure? That is all of the equipment and assets that are needed to bring power to a parking space. Okay, I'll have a diagram a little bit later to sort of illustrate about what that means. But essentially, what we're doing is we're going to put in all the infrastructure, all the pipes, all the wires, transformation to bring power from an EverSource asset, a transformer, to the parking space, and we pay for it all. And at the end of the day, the customer pays for the installation of a smart communicating charging station, level 2 or DC fast, and installs it. Our cost of what we're taking on as part of this program, it can range anywhere from 50 to 90% of the project cost. And so what we're doing is we're lowering the bar for our customers that are in public, that own public spaces, customers that are large office buildings, multi-unit dwellings, hotels, and our communities, our municipalities, to be able to install electric vehicle charging stations. And among many of the communities in our service territory, that is an important piece, to be able to demonstrate your green credentials, your sustainable credentials. And what better way to demonstrate those credentials is by installing an EV charging station. So at the end of the day, when we have spent all of our money, we expect more than 350 sites, more than 3,500 enabled charging ports. And then 10% of those dollars are earmarked for our so-called environmental justice communities, because we're really also interested in, while we're doing this electrification of transportation, putting in the infrastructure, what are we doing to address equity concerns? This is going to be a continuing theme as this goes on, and so we want to make sure that we are at least have an ear to the ground with that. What location types are eligible? I mentioned it before: public parking areas, workplace and universities, multi-unit dwellings. Usually that adheres to a sort of a level 2 charging regime, long dwell time. And then we also have a component of the program for DC fast charging. I'll talk a little bit about it later. You know, some of the learnings we've taken from the program over time, specifically around DC fast, as that's an interesting space for us. And then, as I mentioned, as a diagram about how we sort of see this, EverSource installs, owns, and maintains all of the infrastructure up to the stub out. And you see in this diagram, everything sort of in green, that light green sort of dotted out, are things that we own. So we are taking our ownership beyond the normal ownership model, where normally our ownership would end in a meter. We are now extending that ownership to own both the control box and panel and the conduits and wires leading to the charging station. And again, we are doing this because we're able to take away most of the cost of installing a charging station. And there's also a couple of other reasons why, you know, this is an interesting approach, and why we selected this approach, a so-called make-ready approach for this. In all of our deployments, we've put in capacity in our control box and our electric distribution cabinet for 5 dual port level 2 stations and two DC fast 50 kilowatt stations. Okay, so the buy-in or the customer only has to purchase one dual port or one DC fast, and then they have built-in capacity for future deployments. Maybe you don't want to put in all 5 dual port level 2 stations on day one, but you can put in one, and then as you see the adoption of EVs go on in your workplace and in your town center, at your hotel, you now have the capacity and a separately metered service to put in additional charging stations. Secondly, this is valuable. This approach is valuable because you can now disaggregate EV load from the building. Those of you in the utility space that have robust energy efficiency programs want to make sure that buildings are operating, optimally energy use. So you want to make sure that you are not adding to load, and customers are very keen on this as well, not adding to load on their building meters, and can separately meter EVs, not just for the disaggregation load, but also for eventual EV tariffs and rates that will be incoming as we see EV adoption tick up. So that's why we advocate for this approach. And we like to say, as far as the success of the program, we operate from Pittsfield, and you see that that small town in the western part of the state, to Provincetown, which is on Cape Cod. And over the past 2 years that we've stood up this program, we have electrified over 160 sites with at least one dual port level 2 station. Some have 10 ports. Some have more than that, but 160 sites. And we expect this program, we have a very strong demand on this program. So we expect we will have all the $45 million for this program spoken for by the middle of this year. This was originally a 5-year program, so and it was approved at the end of 2017. So we've really induced demand in this space by being able to cut a 5-year program to what looks like we will have all the money spent probably by middle of 2021, but commitments are probably going to be completed by the middle of this year. So very popular program. We're really excited for the ongoing deployments in this space. But along the way, we've learned quite a bit. And so I wanted to just let you know about some of the things that we've been doing. As we are a utility, we engage in wanting to make sure that we have the proper paperwork and proper agreements on all of our sort of assets. And so when we started on this program, we asked for 3 legal forms for our customers to sign to be part of the program. And it was an encumbrance for our customers. So we recognized that early. We also made them, we also looked in the beginning to seek an easement of a property. Anyone out there in the utility sector knows the easement is a good conversation with our customers sometimes. It's something that go back and forth a number of times. And so over time we learned, you know what, to make the customer experience better, we reduced the agreements that are needed to be signed from 3 forms to 1 and eliminated the easement requirement. And now we're just seeking a license to be able to get on customer site and to maintain that equipment that we own on the customer site. And that's been a boom for us in terms of advancing the program and getting more customers to sign on and get them to sign on quicker. We've also, we built out a network of suppliers, distributors, both at the charging manufacturer level at the contractor level, at the installer level, and are enabling those businesses, companies who are seeing their sales decline in energy efficient lighting installation, because everybody's got energy efficient lighting, and now seeing opportunities in the EV infrastructure place. And we are, that our program enables folks to sort of get off the ground and, you know, seek out customers that they've had relationships with and say, hey, would you be interested in this program? So that's been great as well. And then standardization of equipment. Our electrical cabinet, which we deploy at each and every site under this program, is now a standardized piece of equipment. So when we do go out for further programs in Connecticut and in New Hampshire, we will already have gotten approval for this piece of equipment. I can't stress enough how important that is in a place that has multiple operating companies, to get them to agree to one standardized piece of equipment that enables electric vehicle charging infrastructure throughout the 3 states. So that was super important. And I would suggest, if you are looking to develop a program similar to this, you get that buy-in early, so that you can be able to take those developments, those innovations to other states and other territories as you advance your EV infrastructure programs. Just to highlight some of our stakeholders, one of the important pieces in standing up this program was to be able to tell the story. Be able to tell the story of why organizations are deploying EV infrastructure in our service territory. And this is an example of one of them. Massachusetts Mass Audubon Society, which manages a number of nature sanctuaries in our state, is one of our best partners. They have 9 locations that have deployed or are in the process of deploying EV charging infrastructure throughout Massachusetts. And to them, it makes sense. And this is a conversation around sort of the use case around stakeholders, right? Their members go to their sanctuaries and take a walk for a couple of hours, go to observe birds, butterflies, may take a hike, may have a picnic. If they come in with an EV, they can spend that time while they're taking that hike and having their picnic, charging, and being able to demonstrate. So we talk about the sustainability credential. Mass Audubon is very concerned with the environment. Why not have an EV there for their members and users, so that they can encourage EV adoption as well? So we were more than happy to partner with them on this number of sites. That's just one example of the many customers who've taken advantage of the program. It is a large office towers. It is laboratories. It is beaches. It is our community partners in our cities and towns. All have taken advantage of this program. So that was just one example. And then I also want to emphasize, when you're building the program, you also want to be able to get stakeholders and like-minded organizations to support you and give you guidance and give you feedback as you walk through this. We don't have all the answers, but we can be guided by some of the organizations that are sort of out here in Massachusetts and beyond about how our program's doing, where we might want to tweak things. This here is we've stood up a quarterly EV workshop in collaboration with Boston Advanced Energy, to sort of be able to surface and flesh out some of those issues, whether it's use cases for DC fast infrastructure, or it's a conversation around fleets, and we invite people who own fleets in to have that discussion and solve problems. And so this is an important piece that is sort of part of the entire programmatic building and pushing forward in our EV space. I would be remiss if I didn't also talk a little bit about our residential EV charging pilot. Whereas our Make Ready program is fit for mostly commercial industrial customers and multi-unit dwellings, so large apartment buildings. We recognize a large portion of the charging regime where people charge is at their home. And so if we take a look at a quick snapshot about what this looks like, this is just for illustrative, this is just an illustration of how we sort of see this, right? 80% of the charging is plus or minus is being done at home. Another 15 being done in sort of workplace and destination, and another 5% en route or sort of in the middle, in between time of transit. That's your DC fast experience. Our Make Ready program services that 20% at the far right. What are we doing for the other 80% for home use? Well, we have experimented with a platform on this, and really it is an opportunity to make more fulsome use of our grid. So this is, again, an illustrative curve of residential electricity load in a house, right? You sort of see the curve, a bump up morning, and it goes down in the afternoon, and it goes way up, and you hit the peak load between 6 and 8 and 9 p.m. when everybody goes home, makes dinner, does their homework, and watches movies. So you have that peak load there. What is and the inkling for people is to charge as soon as they get home. But what if we could influence residents, owners of EVs at their home, to think about charging later in the day? Because at the end of the day, our hypothesis is you don't care whether or not you charge at 6 o'clock p.m. or you charge at 2 o'clock a.m. as long as when you're ready to use your car in the morning, you have a full charge. So how do we get people to do the shifting of their load from 6, 7 o'clock to 2, 3, 4 o'clock? Well, we've really thought about what we've had as sort of a dispatch platform on which we can do EV load management, and we do it in two ways. For the residential customer, it's really about scheduling. How can we move folks from 5 p.m. until 12 a.m. or 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. To get them to move their charging regime and give them an incentive to do so. So if we signed up 100 people, gave them $300 to participate in the program, would they do so? To move reschedule their EV charging regime. That allows for more value in the grid overall, because you are creating really headroom and more valuable in-grid assets, because now they're being used at a time when they normally wouldn't be used. So that's something we are very interested in continuing to explore and continuing to build on. What's next? I think this program has been very successful. We are probably going to take another bite at the apple in terms of what we're thinking about Massachusetts. As I mentioned, we have a very robust pipeline of customers that are interested in this space, and so we're going to probably have to do some more here. So that's exciting. But we're also very much in the weeds with our regulators in Connecticut and in New Hampshire. And one of the things that they ask us is, what has your experience been in Massachusetts? So I say that to say that it's important to proceed deliberately in this space, because the learnings that you get from the one program that you want, the one pilot, can be moved and transferred and claimed expertise in other jurisdictions, other places, as you're looking to build up of this program. Connecticut specifically asked us, how has your experience in Massachusetts been? Can you give us feedback? Can you help us build our own EV roadmap based on what has happened in Massachusetts? So that's been valuable. We also are very much interested in the DC fast space. I will say, even though we've offered under the Make Ready program space for DC, the uptake of DC has been challenging. There are several considerations, whether it's first cost of the DC fast station for a customer, whether it is potential demand charges, whether it's technology hesitation. When we started this program, I think the vast majority of DC fast stations that were non-Tesla DC fast stations were 50 kilowatt. Now we're looking at 150, 175, 350 kilowatt stations in the DC fast space. So that space is moving pretty rapidly. But we know if we're going to get to wide adoption of EV charging infrastructure and wide adoption of EVs, this space needs to be solved. And so we are actively pursuing solutions in that space in our 3 states territory. And then finally, I think one of the things that we are keen on, I mentioned this before, is this place around what does the electrification of transportation mean in terms of equity. A utility's DNA is about serving all customers. And so, all of our, since we have ratepayers from all stripes paying into our programs, we want to make sure that ratepayers of all stripes can take advantage of these programs. As it stands right now, an EV infrastructure program requires for you to participate, have an EV. How can we continue to deploy EV charging? I think that's super necessary, but also at the same time be able to leverage some of those dollars to get customers who don't have an EV, in fact, don't have cars, to participate and make use of those dollars, make use of those programmatic dollars as we deploy capital. And so, we're thinking about transit, we're thinking about shuttle services, and complementary to our EV program, but more to come in that space. But we are keenly aware of the need for that equity piece in the EV space. So much more to come there. And that's it. I am excited about what's coming, what's next in this space, and I'm excited to hear your questions. So thank you for your attention.
James, thank you very much. A very detailed presentation, and it's very exciting to hear what's going on in the Northeast United States area. You were asking for questions. We've got some questions, quite a number of them in. Perfect. So we'll just start it off. The first question, James, is what size transformer does EverSource use?
So we have a range of transformers. We have anywhere from a 25 kVA transformer all the way up to thousands. What I think the question is what's fit for this program, right? So all of our deployments are 75 kVA. All of those distribution cabinets are fit for 75 kilowatts kVA of load. So that enables 5 dual port chargers, 10 ports. If we have power from an existing transformer, whether pole mounted, one of the cans that they hang off a electric pole, or a pad mount transformer that we own that's on site, and there's capacity, both electric capacity and space capacity in the transformer, we'll use that. We have had situations where we'll have to put in a new transformer to service the load from the EV for the EV stations where appropriate. And that can range, and usually it's a 150 kilowatt transformer. If we're doing DC fast, we probably want to do 300 kilowatts. So it ranges.
Thank you very much. Next question, James, it says in Canada, a best practice that some utilities have adopted is to require access to session level charging data in exchange for an incentive like Make Ready. The
Yes.
data could be used for planning and to monitor usage and customer satisfaction, given that ratepayers are paying. Has Eversource considered this?
Yes. Yeah. And you know what? It's funny. I didn't include that as part of the discussion. Once you've done this a bunch of times, you don't remember all the details of your programs and stuff. But yeah, as part of participation in the Make Ready program that we offer, we ask that the customer or the charging station vendor provide us with session data so that we can understand sort of utilization. We can understand session data. We can understand if that space or that area is fit for additional charging stations. Some of our charging station vendors have found that as an excellent way to be able to go back out to customers and say, hey, we've noticed that your one station, dual port station, is busy all the time or being used all the time. Would you like another station? And we can use it, we can plug it right next to the first station and use the Make Ready conduit. So yeah, we do ask that as part of participation into the program. But thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder for all of our attendees, if you have a question for James, please don't hesitate to just tap it into the question area on your dashboard. Next one, James. Will this Make Ready funding approach you described also apply for charging infrastructure at truck depots, such as warehouses where a large number of electric trucks might be present?
So that's an excellent question. So currently, our program is only for non-fleet deployments. However, we see this coming in relatively quickly in terms of advancements in medium and heavy duty fleet. We don't think they're there just yet. I know everybody likes to point to the Rivian sale to Amazon, but we are having those discussions with some of our larger companies that own medium and heavy duty fleet. Where I think you're going to see things first, and something that we're targeting in our successive filings for extension of this program is around light duty fleet. All of our municipalities, or many of our municipalities, are looking to electrify the fleets that they use for their traffic departments or for their parks department cars. And so we are having those conversations today with a number of municipalities for light duty fleet electrification. And not just for our cities and towns, but for our large institutions. You may know this, but New England area has a lot of colleges, a lot of campuses, and they have their own fleets. And they're very interested, very keen on electrification. And so I think you'll see the light duty come in first, followed by the medium heavy duty. But we expect our filings to sort of be able to fit each of those roles. And another thing on filings and being able to be agile in being able to address the technology change and saying, okay, we need a program for this, or we need a program for that. This program is part of a 3-year grid modernization effort by Eversource. Our thinking is, since this is such a moving space, we might look to increase the rapidity of filings so that we can stay on top of the technology trends. Maybe we file every year to say, hey, we see this change or this movement in the EV space or the electrification of transportation space. We would like to develop a program rapidly to address it and support it. And so I think being flexible and agile, and I think flexibility was mentioned a couple of times Yes,
It
Dan, I
was,
agree.
yeah, for sure.
It is a space that is moving rapidly in different directions, and it's important that we be agile in being able to address those changes programmatically.
Great, thank you. Next one, James. How was ROI or cost to ratepayers evaluated when considering this Make Ready program versus a set of directly owned utility assets?
So if I understand the question, when we entered into this, we knew that one of the hurdles to EV adoption or EV infrastructure adoption was the first cost. If I am pulling power from a building panel or separately metered service, and I, as a office building in suburban Boston or Metro Boston, have to pay for the whole thing, I may not do so. But if I have the opportunity to, or if I have the incentive or the support, whereby I just have to pay for the charging station and the maintenance of the charging station, I can now put in and deliver to my customers, to my employees, to my tenants, EV charging, and have that amenitized as an offering to being working at that facility. Or likewise, if I'm a municipality and my budgets are tight, this has been this is a boon, right? Because now I can think about what I'm actually trying to do in terms of being a sustainable municipality, what I've got in terms of clean energy goals for my municipality, and we support that cost. But I think really it's about advancing EV adoption, and you know, like any ratepayer dollars, we have to deploy those costs reasonably and prudently.
Thank you. Next one. How do you see the customer experience evolving in the EV space?
Yeah, I think over time, hopefully. I had heard Carl Popham yesterday talking about what that he believes the dealership experience is basically a serious barrier to the customer experience. It is. I will agree with him on that in terms of the EV space. I'll also say there is a dearth of popular and sexy cars out there. I mean, everybody points to the Tesla models. But I think there's not the vastness of selection, right? And so I think customers are going to increasingly see better choice, more models out there, more things to compare a potential car purchase to, and be able to have that experience in an easier fashion. I also think as a utility, from our perspective, I think we have a responsibility to our customers, to our ratepayers, to be sort of that trusted energy space. As I said earlier, we're doing a new thing here. We are introducing ourselves into the transportation space. Utility introducing themselves into transportation space. Who would have thunk it, right? And as we have been trusted for delivering electricity, having resilient infrastructure, being reliable, doing energy efficiency, doing clean energy, we also have to be the trusted advisor in the electrification of transportation space. And I think over time, we're going to get there.
Thank you. Next one, James mentioned it's important to have a deliberate implementation plan and build on progress. If you had to redo your EV journey, would your first step be the same? What's the most important step to build an EV program off of?
That's a good question. I think we had, to be honest, we had borrowed liberally from other make ready programs, and sort of tweaked it for ourselves, to sort of fit the case for ourselves. I think one of the things that you want to make sure you do is make sure you have complete sort of stakeholder understanding about what it is you're trying to do, where you're trying to do it. Get with those stakeholders early on, interface with them, get their buy-in. And I think to the extent you can do that, you'll have a much easier time deploying and getting agreements to do EV infrastructure. I also would say that what makes a lot of difference in this space is having the ability to surround yourself with people who are sort of thinking in this same vein, both in your team and outside of your team, because they can be your best advocates. They can be your best evangelists for, hey, this utility is doing an EV program. How can we help? How can we advance this? How can we help? How can we move this forward? Your enemies in some other things, on some other efforts, can be your best friends in this effort. And I think it takes an ability to reach out to those entities to move this forward.
Thank you. Next one. What has the customer response generally been to the program? What feedback have you received?
The feedback has been very positive. I think, as I mentioned before, we've received a number of responses from our communities, especially, who said without, if not for this program, they would be unable to do EV charging infrastructure, even though the residents in the community had been demanding it, right, for months and years. And so, as we're on this journey towards sort of a clean energy future, I think it's important to make sure that our communities are equipped with the ability to articulate and deploy a clean energy future for their residents. And this goes on, this is not just EVs, this is solar, this is energy efficiency, but transportation is going to be an increasingly important way in which communities burnish their sustainable goals and clean energy credentials. I think also customers come at us with a wide range of understanding as it relates to EVs, EV charging stations, EV infrastructure, right? So it's important to be able, in that trusted advisor role, being able to take all comers and be able to articulate and demystify what all of this means, because a lot of communities, a lot of businesses, a lot of organizations are being pushed by their employees, being pushed by their residents to look into EVs, otherwise they wouldn't, and need an objective opinion about what it is I should be doing, how should I be doing. Hey, EverSource, can you help me put in my first charging station? So I think that's really been the best part of the feedback, right? Being able to help our customers, help their employees, their residents along this journey.
Thank you. Next one. How does this electrification of transportation affect those who do not own cars?
Yeah, and again, this is the equity piece, right? Right now, we are engaged in standing up charging stations. This is what this program is. And again, those who do not own an EV cannot take advantage of these dollars. And so I think there's a conversation to be had about broadening the scope of potential future programs to talk about transportation writ large, right? How do we electrify transit? mass transit further? How do we push forward e-micromobility? It's funny. I've heard on a number of occasions people who will not ride a bike to work, a manual bike, will ride an e-bike or an e-scooter to work, and that just allows for sort of the expansion of getting from point A to point B, whether I'm going to the grocery store or going to my work. Transportation at its base level is really a conversation about economic opportunity. And so to the extent while we're on this journey about electrification of transportation, we need to be mindful of advancing economic opportunity for those communities and places where there is not, where there might be a lack or dearth of economic opportunities. How can transportation, electrification of it, enable that? So that's
Thank you very
something
much.
to explore.
Thank you, James. And just looking at the time, this will be our last question before our break. And this question, James, comes in. It says, the license approach for Make Ready Beyond the Meter is very intriguing. Who ends up owning this Make Ready infrastructure, assuming ducts and conduit? And who's responsible for repairs should there be a failure?
Yep. So we own everything up to the stub out at the parking space. And so we maintain it, we own it, we maintain it, and we maintain it for the program. We ask that our customers participate for at least 5 years in the program. And so as part of that, we have to obtain a license to be on site if and when we need to repair equipment or if and when there's an issue. We don't foresee that happening too much, but we do have, snow up here in the Northeast, and we do have plows, and, it's a reasonable assumption that every once in a while, one of our distribution cabinet gets hit or overtopped. And in that case, it would be our contractors acting on our behalf to address those issues. But we own it, and so we maintain it. And
great, thank you.
To be able to own and maintain that infrastructure on customer property.
Thank you very much, James. We've now reached our 2 o'clock time for a break. Time just really gets by. Fascinating discussion. Thank you for sharing your expertise and leadership up in the New England area for the benefit of everyone across the continent. So we'll let you depart. And just a reminder that we will be breaking now for 15 minutes, and you will definitely want to be back on for 2:15 sharp, as our keynote presentation is going to be coming on, featuring Peter Fox-Penner and Penny McLean Connor. So we'll look forward to seeing you back at 2:15. Bye for now.